Hey friends, Azure Functions has a new programming model for Python developers. And if that's you, you'll find the development experience is that much more familiar. Shreya and Gavin are here to show me how much has changed with Python and Azure Functions with this new programming model today on Azure Friday. Hey friends, I'm Scott Hanselman and it's Azure Friday. I'm here with Shreya and we're going to learn about the new programming model for Python and Azure Functions. How are you?
I'm good, Scott. Thank you so much for having us here today to talk about the new model.
Yeah, so is this new model, we call this a V2? Like we've changed something fundamentally.
Yes, definitely. So our ultimate goal with this new programming model, the V2 programming model, is for developers who use Azure Functions and Python to have a more intuitive, a more familiar experience when it comes to developing functions.
Okay, so more familiar, not from a functions perspective, but more familiar because they're Python developers and they expect a certain thing when they're using Python in the cloud.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so that means fewer files and then using decorators in Python, which I assume is going to make things more intuitive for them as Python developers.
Yep, that's the hope. That's the feedback that we've been getting, and we're really excited to get more feedback from customers as they try out the model.
Very cool. So this sounds like it's going to be a lot more idiomatic. Can you help people who may not be familiar understand like why I would use an Azure function over something else in Azure? Maybe you have some slides to show me.
Yeah, definitely. So if you haven't used Functions before, Functions is an event-driven service and it provides compute on demand. And when you're using Functions, code and logic that you have, it can run when triggered by events. And it really allows you to focus just on your code itself, and everything else we want to take care of for you. So really have that focus and attention on the code that you're writing and the logic that you want to create. Functions also has a lot of out-of-the-box technologies as well, such as extensive monitoring and observability. So all this really sells the point on why you should be using functions to configure your code in the cloud. And I do want to go over a few different common examples and use cases when it comes to using functions. So this first slide I have over here, this represents the automation of some scheduled tasks. So we start with a database that needs deduplication and cleaning, and we have a function that runs on a timer on a schedule every 15 minutes that goes ahead and cleanses the database and deduplicates the entries every 15 minutes. So this is like a common example on why someone would use a function when it comes to their data. And then after this, I have another example, which includes real-time stream processing. So we start off with this app or device that's producing data, and we want the end result to be a data visualization dashboard so we can make analysis on the data itself. And as you can see in this diagram, we use a function to process the data from the Event Hub and then go ahead and send it to a Cosmos database where it's ready to be used for visualizations. And then before we kind of get into more about this V2 programming model, I do want to go over the core of the functions programming models in general. And this includes three main components. The first one is the required trigger. And a trigger causes the function to run. So this could be on a schedule, so a timer, it could be a HTTP request, it could be when an event is processed. But the trigger is really what starts this function and make sure it can run. And then next we have two optional things as well, which are the input and the output binding. So as you can see, the input binding, it can be some additional data that you might want to use during your function. And then the output binding could be maybe somewhere you want to place data after the function runs. And this central, lightning strike, that represents the Azure function, and that's going to be your code, the logic that actually processes the information being given, and then also what is in the output as well.
Interesting. Okay, so those bindings are kind of like parameters and return values, except they're coming from cloud context rather than being legitimately passed in as parameters. But from the perspective of the developer, it feels like it got passed in as a parameter, and I can just call a function in the cloud.
Yes, exactly.
That's very cool. I'd love to see this like for real.
Mhm. Yeah, so we do have Gavin who's going to give a demo. And right before he does, I do want to go into more detail about, what does it mean that we have this V2 model? So to
Hmm.
be more concise, I do want to make sure that it's known that integrated programming model, the thing I just described, that's going to remain the same. That's not going to change at all. That's going to be the core of the programming model, whether you're using V1 or V2. But what will be different is the files that you interact with and the code that is developed, that outside wrapping stuff, that's going to be where the change is at. And that really brings me to why we decided to create this new model in the first place. And that's because we've been talking to customers and getting some feedback that there is a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to being a native Python developer and then going on to create a function app. And we want to do as much as we can to make it easy for our developers to get started as easily as possible to make sure that they can have an intuitive experience when it comes to developing functions. So before I hand it over to Gavin, who's going to take us through the demo, I just want to highlight a few of the features that you already mentioned as well, Scott, that we're going to be changing with this new programming model. So first, we have triggers and bindings represented as decorators. This is going to make it so it's similar to other well-known Python frameworks that currently Python developers are using. We're also going to introduce a simplified file structure. So previously, we had a folder and multiple files required per function, but now we're going to just have one function that captures one file that captures all the functions. So we're hoping that's going to drive simplicity and ease into development as well. And then the last one, which is my favorite to talk about, is the easier access to documentation. We're adding more avenues where developers can get documentation. And this includes IntelliSense, which is going to give you hints as you type, as well as a new functionality allowing you to preview the template code within VS Code. That's going to allow you to get comprehensive documentation without ever leaving the IDE. And with that, I want to bring Gavin on because I know he's going to be walking us through and showing us examples of what I've just talked about.
Very cool. Welcome, Gavin. Yeah, Shreya has gotten me up to speed on a ton of changes here. Let's see them in action.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Shreya. So let me start by actually how does a developer actually use and create a function using the V2 programming model. So let's try running this within a few minutes, and I'll show you how quick and easy it is to get it up and running. So as you can see, I have my studio open with just an empty folder in it. So to create a function right now, what I'm going to do is open my command palette and just to create function. And yes, I want to create a new project. And once you see, we have a Python, a new programming model also along with the regular Python. So once we select this, it's going to select the new programming model. And we select the interpreter. And right here, as you see, this actually gives you a list of files, markdown file explaining what's the new programming model, how to use it, and also a description of every file aware, what's it used for, and code snippets to get you started with it. As Shreya pointed out before, all the functions right now will not, you won't see a different folder for each function, but every function right now is going to be in this one file. So it gives Python a very concise way and a very started with functions. And let me start by actually creating a function for you and running it locally. So let me just delete the comments right here. And now to create a function, what I do is, again, I open the command palette, I create a function. Yes. I give it a moment. It's loading.
Looks like we're creating a virtual environment, a virtual Python environment.
Right. Awesome. Yes, that it creates all that for you on the fly. So let's try creating an HTTP trigger. And let's add this trigger to the function underscore app file. And here you go. So right here, it just gives you a quick API to call an HTTP trigger. And this is the sample code which comes along with it. So the user can actually just run this and just see if their function is working. And so this is the easier way to actually create a function using the command palette. But let me show you how we can actually create this on fly also. So let's try to create a different type of a trigger right now. So for this, let me try to create like a timer trigger. And as you see, for a new developer, the IntelliSense will just prompt you all that you need to know about creating a new function. So for the timer trigger, I do a schedule. Now, what are the options or what are the arguments that I need to pass in this timer trigger will also show up in the IntelliSense. So right now it shows me, oh, I need an arg name. So let me just put an arg name. Uh, and let me just name it my timer. And what else do I need? I need a schedule. So let me do schedule. Now, what is schedule? As you see, it says the schedule is like a cron expression. I said, okay, so let me create a cron expression. I just want this to run maybe every 5 seconds. So let's do this,
And these
5 minutes.
expressions are familiar for people who've done cron, but I personally use the different cron expressions websites that'll help you write those out.
Exactly. This is a standard cron job, which you can cron expression, which you can use in the trigger itself.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just start with this creating a function. I create creating a timer trigger, so I'm passing in what's my timer right now. So the best part is this gives you IntelliSense, so I actually don't have to know the what are the methods exposed. So it just easily shows me everything what I need to know inside with IntelliSense. Now all I want to do with this is just probably just give a log out every 5 seconds. So I'm just saying hello from timer. Now, so we have two functions ready, but let's try running this. So I open my terminal. Okay, my environment is already activated. So all we need to do is just do a func host start. This is similar to how the V1 programming model runs it. And let's see what we get. Oh, so one other thing is it shows me that, oh, I don't have a storage account. So let me try to create, since this is running locally, let me just use a storage emulator to run this account. So let me just initialize my storage emulator. Let me start my storage emulator. So I have my storage emulator ready and it's already started. So let's run the command again, see what we get.
All right, we're bringing up that functions runtime. So you're running an Azure function locally, not in the cloud, but locally with the Azure Functions runtime.
Right. So as you see, we have two functions which got exposed. One is the HTTP trigger, what we have, and the timer trigger. And from the logs, you can see that, oh, the timer trigger has already started invoking. So every 5 seconds, you'll get this. Now let's try invoking the the HTTP trigger itself. So let me just use my local client, which I have. Refreshed. Let's see.
Okay, so we're running the function on localhost 7071, and we're going to call
it. That's the default. Yes, that's the default port which is exposed.
All righty.
Let's say I want to say hello Azure Fridays, and we got the response from the HTTP trigger itself. So as you see, we have two functions which actually ran, and it took just a few minutes to create a function, create two functions actually, and get it running within Azure Functions itself.
Mm-hmm. And if you return back to that source code, if you don't mind, real quick, in the function app py, and then scroll up to the top there, you've got on at the beginning of your function, you've got that on lines 9 and 10, you've got that decorator, that app decorator, giving Azure, I assume, some context about how this function is going to be like, because line 11 is just a regular Azure function, a regular Python function, rather. It's the decorators on 9 and 10 that add some magic, don't they?
Exactly. So if you see line number 10, this line number 10 is replacing the entire function.json file which we had in the V1 programming model. So now you can just skip the whole file and just add this one line, which will tell the Python that this is a Python HTTP trigger function.
Okay, and then the function name HTTP trigger 1
Yes.
is how this will
Mhm.
identify itself to Azure, even though the function's called test function.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool. That's a great use of decorators in Python.
Right. I also wanted to bring up that this is just a small demo example, but a lot of developers are going to create some more complex examples. And I wanted to show how we can actually use this in a little more complex example, and how we can navigate reading documentation and actually coding this function together. So let me share my other screen. So for this example, what I want to do is I want to create a backend service for a food delivery app. So I know that for the food delivery app, I'll require a few APIs like calls, like I want to create a new order, I want to maybe get an order, maybe I want to delete an order. So I know I need at least three API calls. And also, once I have the API, I want to do something with the order. So I want to create like an event once the order is created. So that event is going to, once I have that event, I can do some processing with it. And once I process it, ultimately want to save it somewhere for later use. So I know that from my previous example, I'm going to use an HTTP route trigger, so HTTP trigger. But also I know I want to use event hubs. And once I have event hubs to store it, I also want to use Azure storage. So now, how do I actually use these things in a function? So let me show you how my function app is going to look like with these functions. So I have created a few APIs which we needed. So the first API you see is just getting orders. It's just a regular function, HTTP trigger, which is just going to return the orders what we have. My next function is the create order. Now, if you see this create order, it does have what you see an HTTP trigger, but also you see there's also an output binding associated with it. Now, what this will do is once we get the trigger, we're going to move the order to this event hub. And once the event hub is triggered, we wanted to save later on. So that's where you see that we are using an event hub output binding. So this is what it's going to do at line number 25. It's basically going to set the event, create an event, and send it to this event hub, which I have right here in my look connection. And lastly, we have a delete API, which will just delete the API of the records of in your database. And you see all these function definitions. It's in the route, which will act, and also it has the method which it's going to use. So the delete function is going to use a delete method. The create is going to use like put, and the get is going to use like a get order. Is going to use a get. So once we run this, we'll actually see all these APIs being exposed. Uh, but yeah, lastly, we wanted another API which will actually, another function, sorry, which will actually store these APIs, store the orders in a storage account. So we have two options right now. Either we could create a new function right here in this file, but as you see, creating more functions within the same file can get this file a little extensive and a little difficult to maintain. So for this reason, the new programming model exposes or has a concept called blueprints. Now, blueprints are very similar to what blueprints is in Flask, what many users are familiar with. So even in functions, the blueprint is a container which has a bunch of different functions, and these functions can be referenced in your main function app. So you don't have to have all your functions in one file. You can separate it as you wish for separation of concerns, and you can just reference it to your main function app. So as you see, I have a new file here called blueprints.py, and I initialize this file called, okay, I want this file to be a blueprint. So I just do an app dot equal to func.blueprint. And the rest is the same. It's just the same function how I create. I create an event hub trigger in this case, because from my previous create method, it's going to send it to the event hub. And this event hub is going to get triggered when a new event comes in. And once this event hub gets triggered, I'm going to do some processing to it. And then ultimately, I'm going to save it to a blob storage account. This command is actually going to run my function underscore app. Once it gets all the methods in this, it's also going to show you the blueprint method itself. So we expect to see at least, we expect to see 4 functions being created. And right here, you see, we have the 3 functions which we have in the function app and the function in the blueprint also shown up over here. We can quickly test it out if it's working correctly. Let's say I have get orders. Right now it's empty, so it's going to give me an empty list. Let's create something in it. I created the order. So if you see the logs, it creates the order. It executes the create HTTP trigger. It also executes the event hub trigger, and then it saves it to the storage account. So a new order has been created with order 951. Let's run this, and you see the order is shown up in the list of orders. So let's try deleting this order. Yeah, it was 951, and send it. And if you do a get order, it should be empty right now. So yeah, this is a small example of how the new programming model can be used in a real world example. And this feature is actually helps us to create a new function app really quickly and very intuitive to Python users. And right now this is in preview. So we do have a lot of people actually using it right now, but we want a lot of more people to use it so we can get the feedback what we need and how do we improve this function app and make it better for the other users too.
One question I have is blueprints traditionally in Flask, are a way to organize related views and code. Is this a Flask blueprint or is this a conceptual blueprint in the context of Azure Functions?
It's a conceptual blueprint for functions itself. So it's a similar concept, but it's more native to functions right now.
Okay, so it's meant to make people feel comfortable and say, "Oh, I know Flask." So blueprints in Azure Functions work the same way.
Exactly, right.
That's very cool. All right, let's bring Shreya back in. This has been pretty cool. This really is going to make things a lot nicer for folks that are familiar with Python. It feels, like you say, idiomatic. It feels comfortable. It uses decorators. It uses, blueprint style structures. It sounds like, Shreya, this is going to be a big win for anyone using Python who wants to put serverless things in the cloud.
Yes, definitely. We're really hoping that these aspects can really make customers more productive as they're developing functions.
Now, do I just have to go and update my extension? Do I already have this feature and I don't know it?
You do have to update your extension, and all the details on the number and how you can get started, they can be found on akims.python/programming model.
Very cool. We're going to go ahead and put links in the show notes, and folks can learn more about the new Python programming model v2 for Azure Functions. Thank you both for your time and for hanging out with us today.
Thank you so much.
All right, I'm learning all about Azure Functions using the v2 Python programming model today on Azure Friday. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Azure Friday. Now I need you to like it, comment on it, tell your friends, retweet it. Watch more Azure Friday.